Hello, people. This week I read Black Hawk Down by Mark Bowden. This book gives us roughly three different perspectives. There's a lot of, I say characters, there are a lot of people that are in this, but it doesn't, I'm not going to say harp on, but it doesn't feed the individual enough so that you lose track of individuals as the story goes on. There's a lot of action, a lot of combat that happens, and you tend to not focus on individual people, which makes sense for the story. I mean, if you just follow one person, he's basically just sitting in the dirt shooting, which can be boring after 7 hours. But you don't also want to negate them because they're human beings and they were our soldiers, etc., etc. So we get names, we get some descriptions of people, but it doesn't really harp on individual soldiers in that sense. We have the Rangers, we have Delta, who they call the D-Boys, and we have Command, which would be General Garrison. Now, I say which they call the D-Boys on purpose, because that's the other thing that this book does really well. It really locks in on the immediacy of the history. So, as the story goes, you won't get overly bogged down with the politics of 1993, of why we might be there, of moral dilemmas that may come up being a soldier, etc., etc. If it's not what these particular people, these Rangers or these Delta operators or this general was concerned with at the moment, it probably doesn't get brought up. I like it. It keeps a solid focus. It's very easy to get distracted and pulled too many different directions. But it's also, the author uses it as a chance to be truthful about who it is we're dealing with. It starts with the Rangers, and they are what you would think. These people volunteered multiple times to do what they're doing. It's, what do they say? It's one of the oldest traditions on Earth, being a soldier. In a lot of ways, you can read this section about your Rangers. These are, some are aimless after high school, so they decide to join the army. Some are professional soldiers who want to do this as a career. Others want some excitement in their lives, or they want the challenge. This is something not a lot of people can do, so I will do it. All these various reasons. But as you read it, right, as you read about these people, and the same applies to the combat when it happens. As you read it, just remember that this is sort of the makeup of this type of person. What do I mean? Let's say a race car driver, or someone who likes to, parachute out of airplanes for fun. That's a type of person. There's not a lot of librarian race car drivers. Librarians are a different type. They lean towards this. The race car driver leans towards that. The person who jumps out of planes. So even without speaking the same language, I bet if you went around the world and interviewed various race car drivers or librarians, you would start to see similarities. Like, it's not the same human, but it is sort of the same person talking to you, if you get my drift. Again, they're all individuals. They'll all be different, but there's a generality here. In that same vein, I think those things apply to soldiers as well. There are types of people throughout the world, and again throughout history, who are the type that would be a soldier in this regard. This isn't a conscript. This isn't a draftee. Those are normal people, probably farmers, probably like me, living a normal life and then just get pulled into war. These are people who chose it above and beyond other options that they had. And I think if you read this section and see how they act and then see how chaotic the battle gets, you can, in a weird way, apply that energy when you read other histories about Romans at war, or France versus England in the 12th century and the 14th century and the 17th. You know what I mean? You can apply this and sort of see added dimension that's sometimes not described when reading these other histories. So in that sense, it's very beneficial. It makes it very enjoyable to read these bits. Also, sort of in that same vein, the book is very detailed. But then those details, again, can be, I guess, extrapolated out. So, we have a helicopter, a Black Hawk helicopter, and there's a fat rope, and they grab it like a fireman's pole, and they slide down. This is how they get out of the plane, and it can go, I don't know, however many feet off the ground it goes. A high number, 30 feet, 50 feet, I don't remember the number. This is how they get off. They've trained for this. They're all prepared. But in describing it, you see how much more live is different than training. As much as you want to train and as hard as you can train and as close to the real thing as you can get, you can never match the actual real thing. There's one guy who had to take off some headphones. It was just take off headphones, put on helmet, make sure goggles are attached. Simple. But he describes when he took off those, because they're sort of noise canceling, now it's just every noise hits him at once, from the chopper to people yelling to gunfire to things hitting the plane all at once, and it was like overload, along with the adrenaline of I'm about to go into combat. I think he left him on his neck or didn't attach. It went weird. He ended up taking him with him, I believe. Small things. One person you have to jump sort of out, grab the rope and go down. The first guy out is a new guy, and either the pack's a little more heavy than he's used to, or the height is maybe 2 or 3 feet longer than normal. That is, maybe normally the rope coils at the bottom of the ground. This time it's straight. It's off the ground by 2 or 3 feet. That's it. Because of the nature of being shot at, the nature of the buildings, etc. Just that little bit of difference, and he messes it up. The rope doesn't act the way he thinks or anticipates, or he's too hyped on adrenaline. Maybe he jumped too hard. Whatever happens, he messes up and falls. He ends up living somehow, but it's just like a 30-foot drop. And everyone else, he was the first guy out. Everyone else has to just react. I go after he goes. Some people don't know that he's hurt. All the chaos it just hits instantly. There's no build up. There's no easing your way in. You're in it now. One communications officer, I think, he has all the equipment on him to talk. He thought it would be a good idea to take this certain cord and loop it in a certain way so that he has easier access to it, however that needs to be. Well, they say when you grab onto this rope and you're sliding down, it's nylon. It's almost burning through the leather gloves they have. This is how hot it got. So this little cord, however it's on him, fused and melted. So when he's down, now there's an injured guy. Now his commander instantly needs to talk to, command itself. He can't get through. He's hitting the button. He's looking at his radio. He's looking all over except this one little spot. And it's just, you can't know until you know. These are 1,000 little mistakes that can happen. Of course, next time you train better, next time you add it to the information. But in that new time, there will be something new. These are human beings. Why did he move it? Why did he move the cord? Why did he jump too far? All of this you just can't know until you're in it, and in it is bullets firing, life and death. The next thing they're confronted with, the part that hit me, and the part I would say we being, I guess, civilians. If you're watching this and you've never been in the military, or maybe if you have and now you're out, this part we're responsible for. The rules of engagement. Now, I know it's the 90s and it was Bill Clinton. He's the one who made these rules of engagement that says you can only shoot if you're getting shot at. Seems reasonable. When you get to Mogadishu, it was basically the entire town. I don't know, 30,000, 50,000. I don't know how many people were in this town. It seemed endless. But the whole town just shows up to where the army is. There's troops there. They just start walking towards it. Men, women, children. And in amongst all of them, dudes with guns. And they would pop over a shoulder and shoot. And the person, the lady, the innocent person without a gun, is just standing there yelling and making noise. And gunfire is just whizzing by them. That's the reality of Mogadishu at that time. And clearly you see now the ineffectiveness of the rules of engagement. But yes, they're Clinton's idea, but they're our fault. We, the civilians, are the ones who put Clinton in charge. And more than that, it's the civilians who put pressure on politicians. They are reactions and reflections of us. When we see one soldier randomly, accidentally kills one civilian, and we're heartbroken because it is a tragedy. These things are tragic. And then we put pressure on the politician to say, let's make that not happen. That not happen means he can't shoot any of the 50 people who are shooting at him, because the reality doesn't come across as well, or as fast, or is not thought through. So if we, as a public, overly cheered and promoted politicians who fight, let's say, you go to war, you win wars, and the collateral damage, no matter how bad it is, we never use that in a negative against our politicians, the wars would go completely differently. Now, we're, what is it here, 2024, 2025? We're a long way into the human experiment. It's been tried in other ways. We've had civilizations that glorify war, and they've risen and fallen for various reasons. You overdo one, and maybe it leads to problems you don't want to deal with. So maybe we have the best balance. But it is something to think about. It is a problem. And it is a problem generated by the populace. And it was there for Mogadishu. It was there for Vietnam. I don't think there was cameras before that. So World War I and II, and a lot of Korea, doesn't get the coverage like that. But I don't know, maybe it's the camera more than the word, more than newspaper clippings. Maybe it's newspapers overselling it. Maybe we've lost a resolve. Maybe we're gained humanity. However you want to look at it. That problem, the rules of engagement, did come from the citizenry. But it's also a problem with every war. When you start to look in history, and that's one, if you're old enough, you've lived through. When you start to look through history and you see these generals having issues with the king or with parliament, etc., 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 it's the same pressures on them. It's always the populace, the plebes, the normals. and what they want to accept or not accept, what might make them revolt or not revolt, what would keep them in line or not in line. The same pressure is applied to every army every time out. And it hits me weird because it's a history I lived through. But then that I can apply it when I read other histories. It's just fun. An added fun. But it is true. I think people forget sometimes. I know they'll look at the Ukraine war and just be very upset. Or Israel, Palestine, and be very upset. Like, oh, this one person died. I'm like, yes, this is bad. I don't like it. But what is the quote? The Klaus quote? War is just a continuation of politics. It's politics by another means. It's, at some point, debate fails, and violence steps in to compel behavior. That's all war is. It's not going to go anywhere. At some point, people stop caring to hear, and I guess need to be hit with a stick. It sounds rough, but I've seen no way around it, to be honest. If everyone just acted right, would argue fairly, and accept the outcome, we wouldn't have war. But we all know that's not how it goes. General Garrison. Our second major point is, what did they say? He's at the JOC. If there's an acronym, he'll use the acronym because the military uses their acronyms. JOC being Joint Operations Command. He is a guy who served 2 tours in Vietnam. He ran, what did they call it? The Phoenix Program, which ferreted out Viet Cong leaders that were hidden in villages. Nothing about Vietnam was easy, so this has to be hard. He was what you would think you would want if you're a soldier out of a commander. He's a soldier. He relishes the life of a soldier. He is aware of what the job is. In his words, it's killing people. It's killing people and not getting killed. That's what they send him to do, and then he wants to be good at it. I think in his mind, the better at it he is, the less overall damage gets done. Sort of like cutting out a cancer. It's damage to the flesh, but it saves the whole. This kind of thinking. And by the end of the book, there's a section at the end that's the epilogue. An interesting thing comes up, because you read the book, and then it happens, and then that epilogue. I didn't realize that he, our General Garrison, could have asked for AC-130s. Now, if you don't know, an AC-130 is like flying artillery, essentially. It's the big freaking plane. It can go way up in the sky and shoot massive cannons down on whatever it wants. In my head, they didn't exist in 1993. Because I can't imagine not wanting it at all times whenever I can have it. But he didn't. And our author makes a point not to judge that, which is what an author should do. You want to be fair and say, I'm not an expert. I can't say one way or the other whether he should have had this or not. But he presents it because it's a fact. But I can judge it because I don't have any reason not to. But the judge isn't... I'm not trying to judge it. What I'm trying to do is think through why he didn't ask for this. And I think it's another issue that comes up a lot in various military books. And it's the command, being in command. There's a detachment from being in a front line shooting a dude or attacking or fighting. Bows and arrows, swords, guns, doesn't matter. It's front line versus being way in the back and watching. That detachment. It's constantly changing. So, if it's the Bronze Age and you can't or you haven't studied enough, taken in enough intelligence, researched your enemy enough, and know that the steel is now better than bronze, and your swords are breaking, you're going to suffer those consequences. He had an option to do AC-130s, but his other option is what they call little birds. They're small helicopters that carry Delta around. Very good at night. But Delta are the highest soldiers we have. And in his mind, I think, I could put the Delta in these, land, hit, leave, and then never have to commit the arm. I'm just jabbing these precision strikes. So the AC-130, because it shoots, of course, straight down from the sky, might accidentally hit one of those little birds. And so one of the two would have to stop per what you need to have done. I don't think he wanted anything interfering with his little birds. I think because he was a soldier on the ground, he valued on-the-ground capabilities, and he didn't see any reason. Now, maybe that was, like I said, maybe he needed more flights in an AC-130. Maybe rather than just read about it, he should have been in one. Maybe he didn't completely understand how efficient it could be or not be. Whatever it is, there was a tool. I don't think he was versed enough in it, and I think that's why he didn't call it in. It would have been a little bit more complicated to integrate it with the little bird. But it could have done just mountains of work. Because when the crap hits the fan, having massive artillery be able to keep a massive perimeter would have just done, buku's better. And I think every one of the Rangers in interviews was like, I really wish we had that AC-130. The guy on the ground maybe understood. Wanted all the help he could get. But there's always this separation from command. Every army needs to be, and that's that's the difficulty in being a general, constantly keeping up with, just every aspect. You could know everything about every weapon there is and how to perfectly harmonize them and be buttoned up to the hilt, but you didn't study weather enough and now you're stuck in the mud. It's just everything that could go wrong and you need to know all about it. It's all encompassing. It's really interesting. The last group he goes to is Delta. They call them D-boys. And again, that's what the Rangers call them. These are like super soldier-esque. They're just a cut above even the highest cut of soldiers that we have. Highly intelligent. They can be fiercely independent. I believe in Delta, there's no rank. So if you're a general, I'm going to talk to you the same as if you just enlisted yesterday. I don't have to bow, salute. I don't do any of the other side stuff the military does. So when our Rangers are hanging out with them, they just see them as just like hyper cool. These kids are 19 to 20. They're young guys. So you see this guy who's just like the epitome of what you want to be. Of course you lean towards what he does. You want to wear your gear like he does. You want to walk like he does. The interaction there had an effect. The laxness that some of the Rangers had was detrimental in movements and such. But it's what you learn from actual battle. Maybe you say, house them separately next time, etc., etc. But he makes a point to say about these Delta operators that, again, your regular soldier is just there. Even the Ranger, he wasn't hyper concerned with what's happening or why. Your Delta might be more introspective in a sense. They were talking a lot about having an awareness of what they were doing and why. And not, I'm here because Bill Clinton sent me. More, I guess, philosophical than that. It was very much, they understood there's civilized people. And that those people belong in civilization. It's not okay to get a gun and just mow a crowd down. It's not. But they understand that outside of civilization, that sort of thing happens. And that person can't be talked down. That uncivilized person needs uncivilized actions to deal with them. And they understand that they're those people. That they are, they're what keeps the wolves at the gates, so to speak. And to do that, it's unpleasant work. Of course, they have families. They have their reasons for doing it. The enjoyment of it is what it is. But essentially, that's what they're doing. And it's not pretty. And it's highly dangerous. But they wouldn't do anything else. This kind of energy you have. Now, obviously, at some point, the name of the book happens. A Black Hawk gets taken down. I believe they shoot it with an RPG, which was way more dangerous than I realized. They're not meant to be shot up. I guess the thing that shoots out the back could hurt people or whatever. Or maybe it won't fire out well. Whatever it is, it's dangerous. But they were flinging them up because Mogadishu was crazy. They hit a helicopter. It crashes. And then the whole rigmarole starts. To me, what's hyper interesting here is sort of reactions. From our point of view, our being America, the Rangers. They're young and they grew up with all this talk about America. It's the greatest army on earth, unbeatable, etc., etc. And now they're in it. And they see these Black Hawks as sort of unable to be crashed. They're just too big and tough. And there's nothing the guys on the ground, the enemy has, that can even stop it. The pilots obviously know. Now, this thing could go down easy, but the Rangers didn't. Now, if they did, they didn't cognitively accept it, so to speak, not deep down. So when it goes down, you see almost the shock to morale of these Rangers. And again, you hear this all in history about the King's banner falls and all the troops just get disheartened and want to leave. And then someone has to stand up and rally the troops, right? And you're like, that's the story, but you can actually almost see it happen in this book. In that this thing goes down, they sink a little. The cool facade breaks a little. Panic starts to creep in. And then at the same time, the Mogadishu fighters see it go down and they swell. They are more encouraged. They see a thing they didn't think could go down get brought down by them. They have this great army on the ropes, press the advantage. And that's what happens almost at the same time. Just when you don't need it is when the enemy attacks the hardest. The battle itself is, like I said, hyper chaotic. There are pictures in the book. Yeah. Maps are helpful. There are also actual pictures. Actual photographs. Let me see. Actual photographs. Now, I'm not showing them all because some of these are trigger warning, a bit more graphic, not gory, but there are dead people. And I can imagine it be disturbing, and maybe you don't want to see that. And if that's the case, obviously skip the pictures, or skip the book, or, listen to the audiobook. There's no pictures in the audiobook. But there are pictures and maps in the book. But it was just a bit of a warning there. I'm not going to go too much into detail on the battle, other than sort of the overarch. And I think in the epilogue, he gives the general's letter. The general wrote a letter to Bill Clinton, I believe. And in it, he gives the real root of the issue with Mogadishu. The operation, what they wanted was to go in, take some of Adid's, I think that's his name. I should have wrote it down in these notes. Some of the war, they wanted to capture the warlord, or if they couldn't get him, his top generals or henchmen or whatever you want to say, and to get more intel and get him later. That's what they were working on. Shut this down, shut these warlords down, intel to shut them down. In that regard, they say success. They landed troops, ran a convoy in, grabbed who they needed, and got out with those people, more or less. But the Black Hawk going down, what does he say? Changed what needed to happen. The general says, once the plane went down, our creed would not allow us to leave those men behind. And so now I have 150 soldiers who, instead of leaving in a timely fashion, were sucked deeper into a problem. And the problem turned into, I believe, 18 soldiers died. I don't know how many people. No, I don't know how many people from Mogadishu. Somalis? Is it in Somalia? I don't know how many of these people died. But they came in droves. In Mogadishu at this time, hyper poor, warlords constantly at war with warlords, and just people just run on drugs, essentially. Not a good situation. Just guns all over the place. You'd be lucky if you made it to 30, this kind of situation. So when these choppers go down, of course, Delta stays heroically, even though there's no chance they're getting out. They die. More Delta go, I think, a few more. It's not going to work out. But they were insistent on no man left behind. If they didn't have this, it'd have been 3 dead. Everyone gets out. You can live with that. To be honest, an army can live with 18 people dying. They can live with 100, with 150 dying. We don't, again, like I said, it's the civilians, it's the populace who don't like to see the things that the war produces. We especially don't like to see it happen to our soldiers. It does something. It affects the psyche here. But internally, their code made them stay, and what should have been a 30-minute mission turned into all day, all night, and into the next day. The epilogue here is fantastic. It's his chance, the author's chance, to be a little more broad-based in what he wants to discuss. And these are always very interesting topics after a battle or a war, or however you want to look at it. Like he says a lot in the book, the mission was successful. We didn't lose. But the perception turned into a loss somehow. I think it's just the visual of it. Of this soldier, what is his name? This pilot. I don't know if I can show that. It's too close to the other one. I can show it. This pilot here, captured, paraded. You see these just ramifications of not even a loss, but a perceived loss, wherein it took all the wind out of the sails of Bill Clinton. He had no more resolve for this activity whatsoever. We went from considering Adid the worst guy on the scene to the one to talk to. It elevated him. So from our perspective, we lost any heart for the fight. We wanted out as soon as possible. From his perspective, he could walk around with his chest out and say, I beat the American army. Who else can say? Not many people can say they have done that. Listen to me, I'm unstoppable. But the reality that it caused was I don't know how many more decades, if not still to this day, of just endless, wanton warfare in this area in Mogadishu. It's just a hellhole. Not pleasant, and that is a cost. So if America went in and stayed in and committed more to this, how many of these deaths could have been stopped? But then how expensive would it have been? People complain about nation building sometimes and that we shouldn't, etc., etc. But in reality, like, what happens to these places if we don't? That's the question that we ask. It's the question we make our politicians ask. It's the line we make them walk. We're mad at them when they don't fix it. We're mad at how messy it is to fix. But it is an actual issue. These places, some of these places are terrible and stay terrible because people who could fix it don't. But the cost of fixing it isn't also devoid of terrible. So how do you do that math? But one perceived loss changes the equation. It can go from a nation wholeheartedly agreeing and stopping savagery to get me out of it and let them deal with their own savagery. Also, the rescue was sort of a joint operation with NATO, wherein I think the drivers of the cars, of the big trucks, were Malaysian, and our soldiers were then behind that. So I can't kick the driver out because we're trying to unify. We're trying to work with NATO, our troops and theirs. But the negatives. So here's a Malaysian driver. He drives into Mogadishu. Everything that drove in there was getting shot at. And he's freaking out like, I'm not trying to get shot. So he goes to the spot, stops a little while, picks up some guy, says, those are the dudes. And he just starts hightailing it out. But it wasn't all the guys. What is this? I saw a little bubble. I don't know if that came up. He sees all this and he just starts hightailing it out. He didn't wait. So a lot of our troops literally had to run out. Not pleasant. They did run out. But we, our military, us as our side, would never agree to that sort of setup again. We're never agreeing to have our troops subordinate in any way to another army. And that may be good or may be bad. It definitely may have hurt NATO. Could NATO have been strengthened if we worked through the pains of I guess intermingled command? Sometimes it's a French general, sometimes it's an American. Could NATO have gotten more work done in the world if America had agreed to that amount of integration? Possibly. But who can say, because we pulled out of that. We rejected that. They don't have our values in all the ways we want them, and we're not going to let our toys play together. That was a consequence of just this one battle. That's pretty much Black Hawk Down. I believe if you want a really good visual, because I think visual goes a long way here. The book is fantastic. But if you go to, I think, what is it called? Operations Room on YouTube, there's a guy there who will break down various battles. He gives a fantastic, I guess, play-by-play of the course of events that happened. So if you're interested, what does it keep doing this for? Get rid of that. That's a fantastic YouTube to check out if you're still interested. And it works either way. If you read the book first and then watch the YouTube, or if you watch YouTube first, think that's interesting, then read the book. It's not like either is going to make the other boring. So, That's Black Hawk Down. I don't know what these thumbs up were. I don't know if they show up on the video. I'm about to find out in the edit. And these are your ads. These are my books. You can buy them through Amazon. You can get Amazon Kindle Unlimited. They should be able to be read there in a quasi Spotify style setup, wherein each time you read, I get a certain amount of monies. But you can also read a bunch of other books that are there, comics included, by the way. And then you're not out any money, so to speak, if my books suck. So, I think that's highly fair. Or you can just watch these videos. Or you can, comment. Or not comment. It all works for me. Okay. I think we're done. I will talk to you all next week.